This is the Breakaway Podcast, presented by the National Bird Hunters Association. The NBHA's Breakaway Podcast is brought to you by Purina Pro Plan, fine-tuned nutrition to promote strength and stamina in the canine athlete and longest-standing supporter of the sport of field trialing nationwide. You can fuel your champion with Purina Pro Plan using various physical and online retailers nationwide, found wherever pet food is sold. Purina Pro Plan, fuel the champion within. Garmin, delivering innovative GPS-enabled technology across diverse markets, including sports and fitness, outdoor recreation, marine, automotive, and aviation. Garmin, engineered on the inside for life on the outside. Gun Dog Supply, the leader in training collars, tracking collars, and so much more. Fast, friendly service, great customer support, and the newest Gun Dog products on the market. Gun Dog Supply, we train our dogs with the products we sell. Mule brand clothing and apparel, outdoor clothing for all sorts of environments and conditions. From hunters in briars and wading creeks to forestry personnel, farmers, motorcycle riders, and utility workers, Mule is clothing for hunters, made by hunters for over 38 years. Find your Mule brand gear at www.okidogsupply.com. Gun Dog Central. Gun Dog Central is a centralized location for finding your next dog, whether it be a pointing dog, retriever, flusher, versatile breed, hound, or even terrier, you name it. Gun Dog Central is the place to find your next canine athlete. To find your next champion, visit them at www.gundogcentral.com. OnX Hunt, the #1 hunting GPS app. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. OnX Hunt, know where you stand. And Park Cities Quail Coalition. Park Cities Quail Coalition is a nonprofit organization run 100% by volunteers who are passionate about sporting traditions and determined to make it available to future generations by working to sustain and restore huntable wild quail populations, to encourage and educate interested youth, and to celebrate the quail hunting heritage.
Welcome back for the 6th episode of the Breakaway Podcast. I'm once again your host, Joe Hopkins. So glad that you've tuned in. And if you enjoy this podcast, or even if you're listening for the first time, please take the time to tell a friend, like, subscribe, and review the channel to help grow and promote the podcast and the sport of field trialing that we all love. Our guest this episode is Crosscountry Kennels professional all-age handler and trainer and field trial staple, Mr. Randy Anderson of Vinita, Oklahoma. Randy has over 42 years experience in bird dogs as a hunter, breeder, and competitor, with 22 years professional experience handling some of the top all-age dogs in the country for his roster of established owners. Randy began his foray into field trials early on, serving in an administrative role with the NBHA, while later developing dogs early on for established owners and handlers, such as the Hall of Famer Robin Gates, before eventually hanging out his own shingle as a professional all-age handler. Fast forward, and Randy has won the Quail Invitational Championship, one of the only endurance stakes on the all-age circuit and most coveted titles, 4 times, and several other awards like the Joe Hurdle Award, along with many, many more. Randy has handled top dogs such as Prairie Land Pride, White Dollar, 310 to Yuma, Future Stock, Hall of Famer Valiant, Hall of Famer Miller's Happy Jack, touches Adams County, touches Fireaway, and many, many more. While being at the top of all-age competition, Randy is also a field trial history romantic and genuinely an advocate for the sport of field trialing at all levels, while being deeply passionate about the present state of the game and its future prospects. But before we get to Randy, let's go around the field trial world. In NBHA field trial news, the Northern Missouri Field Trial Association's fall trial wrapped up in Martinstown, Missouri back in September. In the open shooting dog stakes, it was Hey, Mr. Tin Man, pointer male, owned and handled by Kenny Snow, taking the stake. And in the amateur shooting dog stake, it was a wrap-up of Jack Glover taking the first 2 positions, with Glover's Pepper Shaker, a setter female, and Glover's Flintstone, a setter male, respectively. And in third place, WW Triple Pick, pointer male, owned and handled by Doug Meyer. And it looks like the country's favorite 3-legged pointer female, Sadie, for owner Craig Hyde, took another gun dog stake. Congratulations, Sadie and Craig. In the horseback field trial world, it was High Rollins Bad Boy, a pointer male, for Ed and Megan McKay, handled by Matt Basilone, taking the Northeastern Open Shooting Dog Championship in East Windsor, Connecticut. Taking runner-up honors in the Northeastern were Way Better Rebel, a pointer male owned by Bill and Muriel Prim, and Alan Linder, handled by Mike Tracy. Bill Stapleton's pointer male Ramblin' Rivers Natural takes the 2023 Region 19 Amateur Shooting Dog Championship at the Namacoggin Barrens in Danbury, Wisconsin, with the runner-up being named Allie Woods' 11th Hour, a pointer female owned and handled by Adam DeLude. Once again, it's BK's Pablo Escobar, pointer male owned and handled by Sergio Velez, taking the Northwest Chucker Championship this time in Payette, Idaho, with the runner-up champion being Mox Wahi Jack, a setter male owned and handled by setter aficionado Alex Mock. Grove Springs, Missouri was the site for a Chris Cagle Storm in the Region 5 Amateur All-Age Championship, with his flagship bear Haney's Storm Warning pointer male taking the Region 5 Championship, followed by kennelmate Haney's Silver Dollar, another pointer male, taking runner-up. The Carolina All-Age Jamboree bangs on, this time with the Tar Heel Open All-Age Championship coming to a close at Hoffman with another Haney dog, Haney's All-In pointer male, this time owned by Steve and Stacy Croy, handled by Mark McLean, with the runner-up champion being Shadows Lord Magic, another pointer male owned by Carl Bowman and handled by Luke Eisenhart. On to the Region 10 Shooting Dog Championship out in Fields, Oregon, it's Love Train, handled by Tom Griffin, taking championship honors, with another Mox dog, Mox Wahi Dally, setter male, owned and handled by, once again, Alex Mock. Bill Westfall's Wheels Up pointer male won the Oklahoma All-Age Championship out at the Ingersoll Ranch, handled by Andy Darty, with runner-up being Mayfield Storm Charger, pointer male owned by Jack Davis and Scott Mason, handled by Alan Vincent. Some Red Setter action of the National Red Setter Amateur Championship once again back at Grove Springs, Missouri. This time it's Gratitude, owned and handled by Roger Bozer, taking the championship, and runner-up champion being Quatanis Reciprocal, owned and handled by Kelly Aitken. Staying within the Red Setter world, the National Red Setter Open Championship, also in Grove Springs, Missouri, saw Gratitude once again at the top of the podium for owner-handler Roger Bozer. This time, though, followed up with runner-up champion being Firefly's Power Play, owned by Robbie Nesson and Dennis and Bonnie Hidalgo, handled by Dennis Hidalgo. Back over to Fields, Oregon, this time for the National Chucker Shooting Dog Championship. It's once again BK Pablo Escobar for his owner-handler Sergio Velez getting top ranks. Runner-up champion being Long Hollow Buckskin, this time also handled by Sergio Velez. Still in Fields, Oregon, and still getting after Chuckers, the National All-Age Chucker Championship concluded with pointer female Affinity taking the championship for Austin Turley, and once again a BK dog finds itself on the podium, with runner-up champion being BK's Locked and Loaded, owned and handled by Sergio Velez. Back across the country to the Lacey Township of New Jersey, the Garden State Open Shooting Dog Championship concluded with Harbor City Sure Shot, with taking the championship for Karen Lordy and Richard Gillis, handled by Matt Basilone, with Ravenwood Throwing Smoke taking runner-up honors for owner Joan Sincota and Matt Balzone handling. Back to the middle of the country in Grove Springs, Missouri, it's the Southwest Missouri Open Shooting Dog Championship, with Top's Hackberry Ice Chip taking the championship for Luke and Rhea Top, handled by Harold Gearhart, followed by runner-up champion Hell's Smooth Touch, a pointer male, owned by Dr. Jeffrey Hale and handled by Sean Kinkler. The Idaho Open Shooting Dog Championship in American Falls, Idaho, saw Touch's Jimmy Thing, a pointer male owned and handled by Chris Perkins, getting the nod, with runner-up champion Perkins Sawyer Warrior completing the double, a pointer male also owned and handled by Chris Perkins. Back over at the Marathon All-Age Jamboree in Hoffman, North Carolina, it's Miller's Heat Advisory, the pointer male owned by John Mathis, handled by Luke Eisenhart, taking championship placements, with runner-up champion being called Touch's Shadow Rider, the pointer male owned by Karen and Bruce Norton and Dr. Reuben Richardson, handled by Mark McLean. In other walking trial news, the ABHA saw the regional championship come to a close in Berea, Kentucky, with the champion being called the Treasure Chest, a pointer male owned and handled by Cliff Monroe, with runner-up honors given to High Rollins Gone and Done It, another pointer male owned by Warren Parrott and handled by Tony Bingham. On to Cover Dog news, the Wisconsin Cover Dog Championship had to be reverted to an open shooting dog stakes in effort to mitigate the risk of potentially spreading a kennel cough positive at the grounds, but first place saw Cedar Ridge Flash Forward taking first place for owner Brad Peterson, handled by Scott Chafee, and second place being Bad Habits, owned and handled by Ben Mergens, and third place going to Meredith Grade Corgi, owned by Dennis Kaiser and handled by Tammy Chafee. The Michigan Woodcock Championship came to a close in Gladwin, Michigan, with this year's champion being called Grouse Ridge Mags, handled by Scott Foreman, a setter female, with the runner-up champion being named Blue Ribbon Harper, a pointer female, owned by Marty Festa, handled by Robert Ecker. Also in Gladwin, the Northern Michigan Cover Dog Championship is in the books, with this year's champion being named Dunroven Susie, a setter female, owned by Chris Yeager and handled by Rich Hollister, with runner-up champion being named Shady Hills Whiskey Bonfire, another setter female for Shady Hills Kennels, and handled by Scott Foreman. Robert Ecker sweeps the PA Grouse Championship in Marionville, with champion Dunroven's Midnight Ike, a setter male, owned by Dr. Peter Millett, taking the championship role, with the runner-up champion being named Grouse Hill Rambo for owner John Capochi. The 2023 Lake States Grouse Championship in Gladwin, Michigan was won by Llewellyn setter male Bundy's Buckeye Molly, owned by Chris Sellers and handled by Zach Earn, with runner-up champion spot being withheld. NBHA dates around the bend include on November 3rd, 2023, the West Kentucky Field Trial Club will host their first walking trial at the Krause Kennel Grounds in Dixon, Kentucky, with entries closing on October 31st. November 7th, the AFTCA's National Amateur Walking Shooting Dog Championship will be held at the ever so gracious Keith Wright's Redwood Farm in Covington, Indiana, with entries closing November 2nd. Following that, the NBHA National Amateur Championship will directly follow at the same location, with its entries closing November 5th. November 11th, the Southeastern PA Bird Dog Club will be having a one-day trial in Wellsville, PA at the York Pointer and Setter Club grounds, with entries closing November 7th. Now, November 18th, One of the coolest and most innovative events of the season will be held at the LBJ Grasslands in Alvord, Texas. The NBHA is partnering up with its tremendous sponsor partners, Park Cities Quail Coalition, and will be hosting an all-amateur field trial with 4 stakes being Judgment Seasons at Flush, Amateur Shooting Dog, Amateur Derby, and Amateur Puppy, but not before a 30-minute clinic on what to expect during a field trial presented by NBHA President Mr. Ken Sauer. The $65 registration has already been slashed to $50 per person for the clinic, and it will go directly to the Park Cities Quail Coalition in order to help promote, preserve, and protect the quail hunting heritage in the state of Texas. But that's not all. There will be a raffle and tons of door prizes provided by our sponsors, and meals also provided. Paul Ott and the Air Capital Field Trial Club will also be having plenty of stakes on November 18th in Atlanta, Kansas at Pike Farm, with entries closing November 13th. Other field trial dates of note coming up on the calendar: on November 3rd starts the NGSPA Pheasant String of Championships in Y Island, Maryland, and the Region 17 Amateur All-Age Championship in Dexter, Kansas. November 4th will be the Region 13 Amateur All-Age Championship in Iona, Michigan. November 5th, the 81st running of the Grand National Grouse Championship and the 79th running of the Grand National Grouse Futurity in Gladwin, Michigan. November 6th, the Dixie Open Shooting Dog Classic in Union Springs, Alabama. November 10th, the National Amateur Pheasant Championship in Berea, Kentucky. And on or around November 11th, the Region 11 Amateur All-Age Championship in Hornitos, California. And starting on November 13th will be the NGSPA Texas Championship Series at the Bedrock Ranch in Hico, Texas. Also getting underway on the 13th will be the Mississippi Open All-Age Championship at the Hendricks Farm in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Be sure to stay up to date on all National Bird Hunters Association field trial dates and other field trial dates around the country at www.nbhadog.org or www.americanfield.com. Now let's welcome in our guest, Mr. Randy Anderson. Joining us now on the Breakaway Podcast is all-age circuit staple and cross-country kennels professional Randy Anderson. Randy, how's it going, man?
Doing great.
Randy, home base for you, where you park the mothership, is Vinita, Oklahoma. Familiar with Oklahoma, but I have a feeling that's not where you're at right now, because when we started this podcast, we knew one of the things we'd have trouble with is nailing some of you professionals and some of you guys that hit the road hard throughout the season. We're in the thick of the season now November. I have a feeling you're not in Vinita, Oklahoma right now. Where are you at and what are you doing?
Well, we're in North Carolina. They had a good event here. I mean, we didn't do as good as I wanted to, of course, but they had 4 field trials back to back and had some sponsorship and called the Carolina Celebration and added some additional money and some trinkets and stuff for the owners. And it's a start. I think it's really the future of field trials. These things need to be made an event. That's what they to make this.
That's exactly right. And, Carl Owens and his team have put in a lot of work and they're trying to get something flared up and going there. And they've done a good job advertising it and trying to get that going. And there's just a plethora of trials out there. So I can understand why a guy like you could take that rig and your client's dogs and justify going out there for all those trials. You said it didn't go as well as you thought, and that might be the case. You did get a piece of a pretty hotly contested derby stake, though, with a dog called Quail Woods Pine. That can't be too bad when you have a derby that gets something out there amongst all those other hot derbies coming into the field trial season, right?
You're correct. And, he's pretty special. I mean, he was sired by Touch's Fireaway, and his mother is out of Valiant, and his grandmother's out of Happy Jack. So there's a lot of connection. One of the things that I think is unique about him is was whelped June the 2nd, and that's he's just barely past his birthday, and I was worried about him being able to be competitive this Derby year, but he is really his development has really came on. The
spark of hope and prospect when those derbies go out and do great things, especially amongst the strings of your peers and their good derbies, it just makes you look up into the stars and into the future. And I know I talked to you a little bit about that dog earlier, and it's clearly where your heads are at looking forward. But that dog's here and on your trailer now, Randy. But let's go back in time and help me and our listeners find out where Randy Anderson finds himself in the bird dog world to begin with. What was your first dog, and how did Randy Anderson find himself in this world?
Well, I grew up in a family that bird hunted, and I really never, when I was young, I never really paid any attention to breed or sex. It was a Lou Ellen setter or English setter or a pointer or a Brittany. And I got some Brittany's that I bird hunted, and I worked them, and I could call them out of the kennel one at a time. They would back each other if one stopped, and almost had them really too mechanical. And I moved to Vinita and took a job at the fire department, and Ronnie Smith Sr. had the kennel in the same county in Big Cabin, Oklahoma. I went out there and started spending a lot of time with Ronnie, and he asked me if I wanted to sell those Brittany's. And I had an opportunity to actually sell them to Conoco Oil Company, and I sold them. He told me about a pointer that Leon Wilcox had in Hartselle, Oklahoma. And I went down and purchased him to bird hunt, and National Bird Hunters was just getting started. And he said, Ronnie, which we can go into that later, but that was my first really registered pointing dog that I thought that was a high drive type hunting dog. And of course, the National Bird Hunter started, and I started competing with him in that. But I actually got introduced to bird dogs with my family at a young age hunting. But I got introduced to field trials through Ronnie Smith Sr.
That's amazing, because that's not just a name that's, on some people's minds and hearts, but that's one of the legends in our sport that helped promulgate an entire family into the bird dog world on training and competition and everything else in between. And you being in that mix is unbelievable. I can level with you a little bit on the scene that when I got my first dog that was registered with the American Field. Now, I've never owned a Corvette, Randy, but I felt like I had one. And I thought, this is a hot rod. I finally got a real dog here. And the rest was history after that. It just kind of took me down this field trial rabbit hole. But it took that one dog in that right position and that time in life to kind of get you going. So who convinced you, or who actually took you to your first trial, Randy? Because what I find is most people are brought to field trials. There are people that go on their own, but more times than not, somebody's drugged somebody or asked them to go or just caught them and said, hey, do you want to do something today? You want to come to a trial? How did Randy find himself at his first field trial? Where was it? Who was there and what was going on?
Well, it was a big stake. It was the Craig County Field Trial Association, and they held it in Welch, Oklahoma. And it had a big open shooting dog stake with it. But at that time, I really didn't know the difference between an open and an amateur. But it was horseback. They had a big amateur stake, and they also had an open shooting dog stake with it too. A lot of the pro dog trainers were there at it. But I was taken there by Ronnie Smith. And then after that, I took a quarter horse with a friend to the Oklahoma Championship. John Rex was running Oklahoma Flush, and I was young. And the quarter horse liked to kill me. I mean, we'd watch a little bit, canter up, watch a little bit, canter up. Now, it about killed me, but we almost killed the quarter horse. I mean, it was rough on them also, but I knew that's what I really wanted to do, but I did not have the means to get a horse or a trailer, and I was young, had a young family, but I continued to stay around the Smith. I mean, Delmer, Ronnie Sr., Tom, Rick was kind of in and out of the picture at that time. They were starting to do a lot of seminars, but they were really my mentors. And then one day there was a heavyset gentleman from Arkansas that came to Ronnie's kennel and said, me and this guy in Illinois by the name of Jim Hoy is starting this organization called the National Bird Hunters. And Ronnie told me, he said, this is going to be a big deal for the sport of field trialing. We need a jump start. This is going to be a huge impact to our sport. He said, this is a place for you to get started. Of course, I had that hunting dog, and he encouraged me to run that dog. But that was my introductory to field trials, and all that was within a few years. I don't even know it was within a year, but it all really kind of grew together, because I was like 20, and by the time I was 21, we were already running the National Bird Hunter Organization.
Wow. And I've got the same protocol in these interviews. I want to know how many years you've been in bird dogs and experience. And I know you've got around or over 42 years total experience. You've been on the circuit as a professional, took out your shingle 22 years ago. But one thing about your story, Randy, that I sure appreciate and that I'm thankful for, and that I think a lot of people are, they take pride in your story, and this is you had another career as a firefighter, and you served a long time as a firefighter, and then you found your way into field trials. Did you feel like you had accomplished what you could as firefighting? Because when I talked to you on the phone, you talked about somebody else that was a firefighter, and you called them your firefighter brother. So I know that profession, that service is near and dear to your heart. Talk to me a little bit about that and how you got bridged over.
Well, the fire department job was really good for what I did, because I bird hunted, on my days off, which, most fire departments have a lot of time off. I mean, we were there a lot, but I worked 56 hours a week, but we did it 24 hours and I was off 48. That 48 hours, I was messing with a bird dog. Why, some of the people I worked with had air conditioning companies or whatever, but building chain link fence, yada, yada, yada. But I continued just to stay focused on the dog. I did work part-time in the oil field with my family, but for the most part, it was all eat up around a bird dog. And during that time, that I, all the way through my career, I developed some field trial dogs, and the majority of those dogs went to Robin Gates.
Wow.
Some to known would be Chain Reaction, Point Blank, Bravura, and Ironclad, and then probably one of the most famous would have been Point Blank, which he won a good bit with. But those were all coming derbies except Ironclad. I'd placed Ironclad in the national qualifying trial, and I'd also placed him runner-up in an amateur championship. But Point Blank, I won an amateur stake with him, put him on an airplane to Robin, and within 2 days he won the Lee County Derby with him in Georgia. So
wow.
we were track, but I never worked for the public during that time. I kept my amateur status, and the fire department and what I was doing really was a good deal. But yeah, I did 21 years there, retired as an assistant chief. That's about as far as I wanted to go, because I didn't want to go on straight 8-hour days. Right. I wanted that 24-48.
There's a gap, though. You're developing these dogs and they're finding their way onto the major circuit, but there's a space in between that time, and that's a stint with the NBHA. And I got to be honest with you, Randy, I didn't know that you had an affiliation, especially at the inception of our organization. And it was so far back that you were a 20-year-old, a director in the organization when it was an infant. And I think the thing that I want to know is, what was it about this new format or this new excursion? How was it going to be different to the other formats, and who was it going to accommodate, and what was its main purpose?
The main purpose is what it set out to really bait the hook, was it was going to give an average bird hunter an opportunity to show his bird dog. But Dan Smith and Jim Hoy, Dan being from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and Jim Hoy being from Illinois, had came up with a plan to start this organization. But Dan, what I meant by bait the hook, it was the bait the hook, but he knew that his vision was it to be a class field trial type dog.
Sure.
And, my Anderson's White Knight that I won all those consecutive events with in a state classic before the National Bird Hunters had championship, those were meat dogs. And there was even a dog that won, I don't know how many National Bird Hunter stakes that dog won. And his name was Fool. And he was out of Arkansas, but I may be wrong and I may be corrected on this, but I don't think Fool was even registered. And as we went into this, even in the early part of the growth, and I'll back up just a little bit, Ronnie got what we had to have this organization is we had to have X amount of clubs per state. And then there would be a region championship, like Oklahoma, Texas being combined. And after we got going with that and was having a lot of success, these were big events. I mean, tents were being rented. People were coming from all over. And then rewinding a little bit, the bird hunter, the ones who wanted to stay with that type of dog, I may be getting too quick. He had to conform. And, I remember one time a guy went up to Dan Smith and said, "We're not bird hunting." Dan said, "You're right. We're field trialing now, buddy. You're going to continue in this organization. You're going to have to get you another dog." And at that particular time, we were all hooked to the American field. We'd whip through that thing, and at the time, it was Fiddler, it was Ack, it was Mississippi Rifle.
Wow.
Mississippi Rifle, and then we're with Will Wheaton, Fiddler with Freddie Rail. And those dogs were standing in the stud dog ads in American field back there were pages. But we wanted that dog with that poker straight tail, and their Fiddler was. And we, I jumped on there. I mean, I went to the bank and borrowed money for my first dog.
Wow.
And, but for brood females, for dogs to me to compete with. And, to give you a couple of examples, those first years, let's say that the National Bird Hunters, was started in 1980, and I may be off a year. But dogs that were being competed in the National Bird Hunter Stakes at that particular time, two comes to my mind that went on with great careers. There was a dog after Fiddler Ace called Fiddler's Rambling Ace that Raymond Jacobs bought from a breeder in Oklahoma. And that breeder's name was Glenn Miller. And he had bred the Fiddler's Ace, a rebel bred female. And that dog was named Fiddler's Rambling Ace. Won 5 open shooting dog championships after he was started in the National Bird Hunters. And that's back when shooting dog stakes was 70 and 80.
Wow.
And there was a dog, Dr. C.E. Ransom. When C.E. Ransom had a pro trainer running his dogs in National Bird Hunter Stakes named Clyde Ashcraft, he had a dog called Levi Bridges, and he won 22 times, counting the National Bird Hunter Stakes, but he also won the Endurance Championship when it was 3 hours. Wow. He won the Texas Championship with over 70 dogs in it. And that would tell you what kind of dogs, just within a few years, that we were trying to get through the National Bird Hunter Organization. And some people said it was a horseback dog that we were trying to run afoot. And really it was, but to throw this at you, some of the things, Dan Smith had just recently passed away within the last few years. He went to a National Bird Hunter Stake, and I'm not saying it was a negative, but one thing that he said, that when we did start it, we had a 22-minute back course and an 8-minute bird field. And that bird field was a theater for people to watch. You could pull up on the tailgate, drop it, put your son or grandson on the tailgate,
wow,
open a Coca-Cola and watch dogs work. The unfortunate part, the dogs got real smart. They would be waiting on us in the bird feed. They would hit them horse tracks, away they'd go. So we came to sprinkling the back course to try to stop that, but we continued to have an 8-minute bird field. Dan kept TV rights to the National Bird Hunter Association probably all the way to his death.
Wow. And
he told me that it wouldn't work because, you correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a bird field anymore.
No, the format's changed to where now the birds are more or less sprinkled throughout the course.
Yeah, 30-minute stake. And, ours was 30 minutes too. If you got to the bird field before 22 minutes, you were in that bird field a little longer. You wasn't disqualified for being in there at 19. You had 30, but you had at least 8 minutes in a bird field. And that would allow it to have been televised.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was different when we first started all the way through, the only people that were on horses were the judges. And there's a couple of things that come to mind that I think that would be interesting is we did end up having a horseback gallery. But we didn't know really, we had to seek horseback type field trial judges. We had Andy and Buzzy Doherty. They judged some of them early. We had L.D. Hayes that owned national champion Wahoo's Trouble Dog.
Yes, awesome.
Judge for us. Bud Epperson, who was part of the old Spunky Creek Kennels back in, his brother back in the 30s. But Bud was also Delmer Smith's uncle. And but Bud Epperson judged some field trials for us. And I remember Bud kicking out derbies. I remember there was a pro trainer from South Coffeyville, Oklahoma, that had some beautiful cross-match bred dogs, but they were broke. Broke wing and shot, and Bud Epperson didn't use them. And I remember him explaining that they were judged on potential and that they had taken all the potential away. And I also watched L.D. Hayes, who was a horseback judge. And a lot of us was somewhat stunned by that because we were trying to put too much pressure on some of these young dogs. And even to this day, our stakes has changed too. It's taken a lot of fun out of Derby stakes. I mean, there's not a lot of difference between a Derby stake now and an open stake, but we had to have that direction we had to have that type of direction to get the kind of class dog that we wanted to go forward. Now, fast forward and then real quick is I wanted to go a different direction, and so did Dan Smith, who started the National Bird Hunter Organization. We decided to get horses and go shooting dog or amateur horseback. And Dan had a dog that won a lot as a National Bird Hunter dog that won with Gordon Hazelwood and Jack Harriage as an open shooting dog also. That was really the type dog, but they were bred. The genetics were there. The foundation was there. And of course, back then everybody had a lot more wild birds, no matter where you lived. Everybody bird hunted. But that was our vision. And I stayed a national director to try to keep that going, mostly because I was more like a puppet. I was young. Dan said, look, I got to keep you on here. You vote with me. We don't want to change no rules. And we kept the horses out. There was no scouting at all. I mean, You got to remember the birds were planted to not get out of.
You didn't need a scout. They were planted where a scout wasn't necessitated.
Exactly. The birds were going to be 10-2. We were wanting a strong dog, but if he got out of pocket and you couldn't get him back, that was your fault. Same rule, same standard that we have with minimum requirements. If you didn't get in a 30-minute stake, if you didn't get him back in 10 minutes, he was disqualified.
Yeah.
And the only time that we had a scout was at the national level, and it was 2 designated scouts. I did it 2 years in a row. I did it at Conway when Fiddler's Ace won it, and I did it when Curvin's Cloudy Night won it, and it was held in Pine Bluff. I did it with a trainer named Mike Hicks, who was originally from my hometown that moved on in the hunting world.
And you said designated scouts, Randy, and when we were talking earlier, that kind of went over my head, and then I had to kind of clarify it with you. But these weren't scouts that really worked for the handler. These were scouts that went out, looked for the dog, and essentially reported back to the judges.
Yeah, the bird planting deal, we had meetings on it to where we wanted these birds planted to where a dog had to reach, had to hunt, seek, and find game. We didn't want it right down the path. So we studied these courses to where we were going to plant them. So we knew where they were, the designated scout. But what we did is we went and looked for those dogs. And if we found them on point, we would call point. If they wasn't there, we went back and checked in and said he wasn't there. And it was in an area to where a walking dog should be. We didn't ride a mile in there or anything like that or try to get one to the front. It was actually 2 people that did not have a dog in the fight that went out, looked for the dog, either pointed and went back and reported that he wasn't or was, or we'd call point from that area. And it was going to be within so many yards.
Right.
And it really worked out good. It kept things fair. There was no cheating. And not to say that there would be, but there was no help to the individual dog to do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. One of the concerns with competitors, especially a walking trial, is a scout's going to go out and drag the dog back or get it out of a situation it shouldn't be in the first place. And granted, that's a viable concern. But in this case, the scouts were just kind of sentries. They were reporters or relayers of fact. They weren't necessarily totally a part of that trial. Randy, our game has changed and it's evolved. The format is slightly different. Like you said, we don't have a bird field anymore, and we've got accommodations for handicap handlers on ATVs and horses, and that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But it's definitely morphed into something that looks different from the onset. But I think I can say with some certainty one thing that hasn't changed, or if it has, it's slightly changed, is the type of sharp and polished class dog that the organization is still after. And bird hunting is bird hunting, but like you said, field trialing is a whole nother thing. And I don't mince words when I talk to new people or people on the outside looking in. Our competitors and our dogs that are successful, they're that for a reason, because they're some of the best, and they are genetically tuned, and they are trained sometimes professionally, a lot of times professionally, and they are still the pursuit of a world-class dog. And, I've said it many times, our top echelon in the walking circuit, they could be very competitive, and they are in a lot of cases, and can easily win in shooting dog ranks. But we separate these things to accommodate different people, and we're in a pursuit in the National Bird Hunters Association to get the most discerning trialers, trainers, handlers, and hunters, but also introduce new people. And I'm blown away at how it's changed and how it looks different now, and that you were a part of that inception. You end up, though, ultimately on the all-age circuit, and you're one of our mainstays in that circuit, and I want to talk to a little bit about that. But talk about your transformation, your transfer from your NBHA days, into that maybe that gray area where you're in horseback shooting dog as an amateur, where you decide, it's time for me to hang out my own shingle and be a professional at the top.
Well, during that time, I was breeding a lot of dogs. I was standing Mortlack, which was a Rebel Hawk son that Perry Michaels owns. And I went and got him, pulled him out of a kennel in Arkansas. Perry was an Arkansas Fish and Game Commissioner that was appointed by Clinton. And he that wasn't what he did for a living, but I mean, they're appointed by the governor.
Hmm.
Perry was busy. He owned a company that bought right away for different things, whether fiber optic or whatever. But he also was a lobbyist for the school teachers. But he built those grounds with the help of some ideas from John Criswell, who was a politician also. But he had Mortlack that he had bought and put it with Andy Doherty, and the dog washed out due to being too much dog. Well, they bred him before I had him, and he was the sire Barshoe Brute, who's in the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
But I bred Mortlack, produced, Dr. C.E. Sanderson from the Carolinas had a champion out of him. After I had him, called Mortlack again. I had Ironclad out of him that ended up winning championships. Semper Fi was out of him that won championships. At one time when they were keeping stats, there was a guy that was a professor of mathematics named Frank Thompson. He used to keep the stats, and he had the highest percentage of throwing champions for no more females than he had bred. But I stood him. And of course, I had a lot of puppies. I was raising a lot of puppies at the time. And the ones that I would pick to be dogs that would develop and go in a string in an open string. Billy Wayne Morton had bought dogs from me before. There were some other people. Weldon Bennett had bought back to back from me.
Wow.
And a lot of these were out of Mortlack. And that, and then the ones that didn't make it, I had a South Texas connection. And of course, there was a lot of bird hunters back then also. But so, I judged a lot of championships. I would kind of got into the breeding part through Wild Way Kennel, through John Criswell and Lee West, who was a U.S. federal judge. And everybody that I'm mentioning are in the Hall of Fame. And I was breeding for them also. I had the facilities, had the country and the time to try to do some development. So we'd partner on some litters. But once I met a lot of people judging championships. I mean, I was fortunate enough, some of my travel, I've judged stuff from the prairies while I was at the fire department, plumb to Florida, and met a lot of people. And when I decided in 2001 to hang my shingle out, I already had everything I needed: trucks, trailers, kennels, and the clientele. First year I went pro, took 50 plus dogs to Carson, North Dakota. I had two helpers, both of them were South Texas hunting guides, Aaron Allard and Alan Sedovey. And, every year just been, continuing to do about the same thing, same tracks,
Right.
And that's how it got started, and some of it was rough going in. And actually, to tell this part of it, Scott Miller had moved on, and Gary Keel, when I first went pro and went to Gary, I actually talked to Scott about some of the dogs that were at Gary's. And I called Gary to see if he would be interested in getting rid of any of those dogs. And one of the ones that Scott Miller said, it was a dog called High View Tribute, who had won a lot in the National Bird Hunter Stakes. He said, that's the one you need. And I talked to Gary about it, and Gary put him with me. And I was actually still at the fire department when I hung my shingle out. And I went to the National Free for All Championship, and several dogs in it. Dog did a great job, made the callback. And then that July, I retired from the fire department, went north, and the dog come up sick and ended up having liver cancer. But that dog would have made it. But and his career earlier was a National Bird Hunter dog.
Wow.
And that was a big start for me. And actually, that's how that got started. After that dog died, I asked Gary if he'd be interested in purchasing a dog. And he really liked the dogs that he had a personal connection with through his breeding program through that Fiddler line. God, I went blank. Honky Tonk Attitude was out of it. But Fiddler Rocky Boy.
Yeah.
And you see that pedigree, that Fiddler Rocky Boy in a lot of dogs,
Oh, super, super prevalent. It's starting to find its way out of those single digit generations, but it was not only a prominent sire line, Randy, the female families that are still around kicking and producing these dogs, all across the board. And don't quote me on this, but I think a large part of the pedigrees and Shoot to Retrieve even go back to him now. And you can find him nestled in there. It's amazing the impact that dog and that family had and how far back it goes and how still, more or less relevant it is today. And we've looked back at your NBHA career, Randy, and it was a good one. It was a flash in the pan, but it was quality, and you were helping the organization and being a part of its early history. But when I talk to guys, they essentially kind of divide their career or their progress into two categories, and that's accomplishments and memories. And you're in the all-age circuit, but you've been in all levels of it in different formats all over the country. But what are some of the biggest accomplishments that Randy Anderson has had up to this point?
Well, right after that dog of Gary's had died, Gary did buy a dog, and his name was changed. Gary changed it to Future Stock, and he had placed a few times with another handler, but I talked to that handler, and he said, he'll pick up some third-place checks. And that's when Gary said, I think we need to, if he's got that type of stigma to him, we probably ought to change his name. So Gary changed his name to Future Stock. That first year out, I had taken him to West Tennessee and won it. There was a lot of dogs, 60 plus. And I won that open all-age stake. And then a week later, I went to the Carroll County trial and won it. Now these are open all age stakes, not championships, and they were loaded with entries. If I said there was 75 or if I said there was 68, I may be a dog or two off.
Wow.
But they were big entries, bigger than what we're running in now.
Right.
And that put that dog in the Invitational. And they listed him. I remember looking at the ad. They listed him as a champion. You know how they used to put champion Miller's Silver Bullet,
yes.
champion. Then they had champion Future Stock over there, and I thought, wow, they don't even realize that he's not a champion because of those big entries. But before we left that Invitational, this is kind of the neat part of the story. I won that Invitational that year. That was my first championship as a pro, and that meant a lot to me.
That's unbelievable to me. That's unbelievable that you're right out of the gate there, and in one of the largest, if not the largest, endurance stake on that circuit at the time, and still today, with all that history and all those great handlers and those legendary dogs that grace the walls there at Paducah in the clubhouse. Randy Anderson comes hot out of the chute and gets it with the first dog he puts on the ground there.
Yeah, I was braced. You know, a lot of my colleagues, Robin being one of them, and some of the others were giving me a hard time because I was going to be braced with I believe it was True Spirit with Farrell in the final. They were trying to take odds on how bad I was going to get beat, and I had a plan, and I kind of told them, and they said it wouldn't work. It worked, and I won't go into how I did it, but I used it to my advantage, and it ended up being good. And then after that, you know, David Williams put Silverhawk with me. I won a championship with him. Ended up with Anderson of Pride early on, won with him, and David Williams had a dog called Rebel Magic, and he had won the Southwestern with her, and I had an opportunity to run her, and I actually placed her in the West Tennessee the next year. And then David took her on and had a great career with her. A lot of those dogs go back to the David Williams, and you know, is the father-in-law of Jamie Daniels. A lot of those dogs that David still run go back to a female called Hawks Royal Dot that we had bred to Mortlack, and that produced Rebel Mischief, and some of David's dogs all go back to that particular bloodline.
Wow!
But those that was the start of my career, and that winning that Invitational that year was unbelievable. I mean, that and going north and the history of it. And the Invitational field trial to me is the field trial. Yeah. I remember when John Russell used to when he did his introduction before the drawing, he called it the best field trial. Mm-hmm. And a lot of breeders, you know, used to hinge their breeding programs off the winners, off of the Invitational. I mean, you got the top 12 going at it for 3 days.
Yeah.
It's not getting luck, you know, and you're going for an hour and then coming back for a 2-hour callback. And those endurance stakes are very, very important. And some of them have been wiped down. I mean, I think we need to go back to it. I mean, the free-for-all used to be 3 hours, and I think it's half that. And without those endurance stakes, we're going to see a weaker dog as we go, you know, into the future.
You stayed early in your career when I asked you the question on your biggest accomplishments with Future Stock, that first one. It's just crazy that dog won that championship in your first year in the Stars line, and that just kind of sets you on this trajectory, as I'd imagine, in your all-age career. But you've won that trial 4 times. You've won the Quail Invitational 4 times, and also Miller's Happy Jack was a runner-up in 2012. So it's obvious that the trial is important to you because of your accomplishments there and what it meant to your career early on. But just like you said, the reverence of these endurance stakes and the history behind these trials, you know, you can't make these people and these dogs and the moments and what they did and how they won the trial, you can't make that up, and it lives in history. And like you said, you're afraid that these endurance stakes and these trials of great reverence are slipping away, and there's a multitude of reasons as to why, but you know, there's a preservation that has to take place. And when I walk into Paducah and I look, one of my favorite things to do, one of the first things I do is I go into the clubhouse and I just go over those photos. I love looking at those photos, those Invitational winners, and you know, Skyhawk and some of those dogs that were, you know, near and dear to me just as a fan. And I think about what they had to do in that Paducah mud in the cold, and you know, the competitors that were there and the other dogs. And so it's no wonder that that's one of your biggest accomplishments that's close to dear to your heart. But it wasn't a fleeting thing. You went back and you've taken dogs and you've won it multiple times and runner-ups and stuff like that. But Randy, accomplishments and memories are two different things. Running on these in the prairies, in the piney woods, in edge country, and out in the Midwest, and sometimes in desolate places. You've went as far as, I believe, Oregon. Is that correct, in running trials?
Utah. I mean, Nevada. Yeah.
You've covered the entire country. Talk to me about some of your most fondest memories up to this point.
Well, I mean, the prairie's always been, you know, I love the prairie. I love Canada. And, you know, winning with Happy Jack up there, you know, when we had one runner up with him before, but winning at Mortlack with him was a fond moment. I mean, with just minutes to go, I sent him as far as he could go and worried about getting him back because if he didn't want to come back, there was a good possibility he would find a way not. And, that's a fond memory. I mean, every time you win one of those championships, but the prairie was always dear to me, and those accomplishments on the prairie, whether it be at Stoughton or at Manitoba, or of course, you know, Mortlack was probably one of my fondest places. And a lot of it, you know, the history at all those places I just mentioned is unbelievable.
Right.
But the memories of and accomplishments of the Prino Awards, and I'll go back to when Happy Jack won runner-up, a dog that I ended up winning the Invitational with the next year should have been in there.
Touches Adams County.
Adams County had it won, and him and another dog hooked up off the breakaway, and they lost them, and we started right there. We put Happy Jack down, and away we went. Richie Robinson had a dog in the Invitational. I think it was Rapidan, and I may be wrong on that, but he had a setter in the Invitational, and he flew in, and we worked together and went there together, and he scouted for me, and it was all we could do to get old Jack around there. But Jack ended up winning runner-up, but Adams County and Weldon Bennett had won it that year with
Coldwater Warrior.
Yeah, and but Adams County, he all he had to do was go through there and do and finish. He was the top dog going in.
Wow,
and it allowed us to have an opportunity. And then I believe it was the very next year, Rick Peterson had purchased Adams County from Keith Wright, and we ended up having an exceptional year with him, got him in the Invitational and won it, and they also won the Preen Awards that year.
That's amazing. Now, summer camp, correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, is in Antler, North Dakota, or at least has been in the recent past?
Yeah, we cover a lot of area. I mean, basically Bottineau County, but my headquarters is in Antler now. It was in West Hope for about 15 years. And housing changed. Country hadn't. I mean, country's changing due to the CRP coming out, but my training grounds is basically the same areas.
You're quoted, and I picked this up from an interview you did years ago, but I heard you say, and it's just stuck with me over time, that if you couldn't go to the prairies, you probably wouldn't do this anymore. And that's a pretty distinct and strong statement there, but it just goes to show that your reverence, along with your peers, and the importance of the prairies and what they provide for your dogs, and your clients. It's clearly one of the pulses of at least the horseback segment of our sport. And there's all this talk, and I can't say that I'm abreast on it, but there's all this talk that we're losing not only our prairie trials, but the grounds through which these prairies are being used for our training and the development of these future legends. We're losing all that. Can you just speak briefly on why that is and what can be done, if anything?
Well, of course, farm bills would help, to make it worthwhile for farmers to re-up or to put country back into large portions of land into CRP again. I mean, it's so important for nesting, and having that opportunity to work across that CRP and then of course when the crops are out, it's endless country. But even some of the places where it's native prairie, the grazing practices and stuff has changed, and fencing's changed, but it's where there's a will, there's a way. The key is, we can't lose our prairie trials. I mean, it's the start of the season and the hopes of a great derby. At one time, I think I could give some people some time. I cannot tell you one major circuit all-age dog that didn't go to the prairie at least once in his life.
Wow.
And, that may have changed over the last few years, but a few years back, I could not tell you one that didn't go with somebody.
It's amazing.
Whether it changed hands but that prairie's been so important for the early development and the tradition of it. I mean,
right. And speaking on that tradition, Randy, not only have the prairies, been a traditional place where the season kind of got started and where hopes are hopefully instilled in some of the young talent and dogs are polished, but it's an integral part of the game and it carries through the season. Those dogs take with what they get on the prairies and they take with them the rest of the season. And I know tradition has a really, really distinct place in your heart because a few years ago you undertook a task that was unique to say the least, but large in scope and scale. You took the John S. Gates, the famous dog wagon, up from the prairies and had it completely restored. And I believe now it's down at the Bird Dog Museum. And I'm just dying to ask you, why was it so important for that piece of equipment to be restored and viewable to the public?
Well, to be honest with you, when I took that on, and there's a story how I got it. It was basically getting ready to be moved into a dump where they could build a Quonset or a machine shed, and that they were given another opportunity to maybe do something with it. And they went to Robin and said, "You think John Rex is going to do anything with it?" And Robin said, "No." And I said, "Can I have it?" Robin said, "What are you going to do with it?" I said, I'm going to restore it right back like it was, and take it back to Oklahoma.
Wow.
And, so that's what I did. It was restored, and we kept it at camp. I really never could get arrangements made to figure out how to get it back home, and we would roll it out. The Cenex, which is a farm supply / hardware gas station in the northern country. They let me store it at their place, under roof every year, and then we'd roll it to camp and use it as a photo op, and we'd put it as a backdrop to visitors. And we did that for a few years, and then as some unfortunate circumstances, I figured the best place for it would be at Grand Junction, and I thought, well, I did this, and I thought we got to get it back, and I called Scott Griffin, who was my owner with Happy Jack and White Dollar. And I said, we got to get it back. And he said, find somebody to ship it. I'll pay for having it shipped to Grand Junction.
Wow.
That's how that come about. I originally did that take to Oklahoma to own it, but it's where it needs to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can remember going into that atrium and putting my hand on that artifact and thinking about the champions that had graced those holes in and out all day long across the prairie, the miles that thing had been pulled, and not only that, but the people that utilized it and the stories and memories that piece of equipment could talk about. It would be amazing. It'd just be amazing. And I just, on my personal behalf in the field trial community, I'm sure as a whole, we just thank you for that effort, because not only was that a great story, that's preservation of our history and tradition, and it takes literally getting your hands dirty to do that sometimes, and that wasn't an easy task. And I want to talk to you more, Randy, about some more history, but we're going to walk down this proverbial and hypothetical shed row in the kennel here, and we're going to look at some dogs that Randy has had in his career. He's had his hands on, he's cultivated dogs that's been in the history books and will stay there. We've talked about one already, and that was Future Stock, the 2001 Quail Invitational champion. Randy, your first champion winner as a professional, which is just mind-boggling still yet, but also an award that I want to touch on that you've had other dogs win as well, but award to me that's kind of under the radar that I think means more than maybe what we get credit for, and that's the Joe Hurdle Award. And that's the top point earner and top point earning qualifying dog going into the national at Ames. And you accomplished so much with that dog just in the small span of time in your first year.
Yeah, for the most part of that is because of those large entries. And I placed him all throughout, and there's some bonus points with the Invitational. But, there was a lot of dogs running back then. There was a lot of big field trials. Continental was drawing, around 100, and so was the Florida, and Hobart Ames was drawing in the 70s and 80s. So it was a great accomplishment to win that award with him.
Right. And I think about Randy Anderson in the first years of your career, and it's kind of where I'm starting to pick it up and really starting to pay attention, and things are starting to be ingrained in my mind memory-wise. But the dog that really comes to mind early on in your career is Prairie Land Pride. Things that stick out to me is Prairie Land Pride was a 7-time champion. I remember reading about him winning the Mid-America Prairie Championship. But the thing that I thought was the best or the coolest thing is that dog qualified for the National from his Derby year every year up until his death. And not the easiest thing to do when those entries are that big.
No, he was, just a little bit about him. He was the hardest working bird dog that worked for me that I'd ever worked. He was, like I said, he was a 7-time champion, 7-time runner-up. If he would have been prettier, what I mean by that, he was, he was low in the front end sometimes.
Right.
And his tail wasn't poker straight. And that kept him with those 7 runner-ups. If he would have been prettier, he would have been a possibility of 14-time champion.
Wow.
He produced a champion, and he produced some winners. I forgot his numbers. But I won in, the Continental Derby Championship with him. So he won in the Piney Woods all the way to Mortlack. And that's a special dog that can go to the Piney Woods. I won in the Edge Country with him also, and to win on the prairie. That's a special dog.
And I commend you just for that alone. It's nothing to see Randy Anderson's entries literally all over the United States. And, a lot of our segments and a lot of our participants and competitors, they seem to, compete in their neighborhood or stay regional or stay close to where the circuit is the thickest. But, Randy Anderson's not afraid to hook up that trailer and go all over the country, and you do year in, year out. And, one of the dogs too earlier on in your career that I also just sticks out in my mind like a traffic light is 5-time champion White Dollar. And you told me, and I knew White Dollar was a champion on the prairie, but Randy, you told me this dog won a stake that was just an absurd amount of money that I'm not sure people really knew existed back then in those stakes. How much money did that dog win in that one stake in Canada?
$25,000. Wow. And it was there was a big portion, not just the $25,000. There was additional money. I think runner-up might even been $10,000.
Wow.
Richie Robinson and I was swapping out that year. He won runner-up. I won the championship, so we both got a pretty good scout check on top of that. So, and I just came off of winning at Mortlack too, I believe, with Happy Jack at the same time, and went on to Manitoba and done some winning. It almost needed a Brinks truck to bring me back across the border.
Good problem to have.
Yeah, we placed. We got White Dollar as a coming Derby. Scott Griffin was owner of him also, which owned Happy Jack. And in his career, I put the first win on him all the way to his retirement. He had 22 open placements.
I'm sure he won further south than this, but the dog won from Canada all the way to Boonville when he won the Southland. And anytime you can just, circumnavigate the country and put placements and championships on a dog like that just speaks to their acumen and their talent and all that. Now I'm going to bounce back and forth between some dogs, Randy, that just come to mind. And I want to give this one his due time and spend some time on him, and that's Valiant. That's the dog that's probably the closest on the register here with regards to history and accomplishments. Mac, who just stayed in the American field and on our cover and on the winner's podium, all these pictures, 2021 Hall of Fame inductee. He was the 2019-2020 Purina Awards Dog of the Year, another Joe Hurdle Award winner for you, 6-time champion, 2019 Quail Invitational champion. buy Miller's Happy Jack out of that multiple champion producer, who I believe name was Tina's Teardrop, who ended up being, I think, a blue hen pretty much with regards to production. But the accomplishments and the list of things this dog has done, and the neat little nuances attached to him, they just never seem to end. And the more research I did, the bigger the list got for this dog, right?
Yeah, I tell you, one of the things that's dear to him is, you pick him out of the litter. He was a stud feed puppy, and he was with me, and I was working him in Conway, Arkansas, getting ready for a field trial. And he was about 7 months old, and they run the buck tuck at Conway that year. Jamie Daniels come up, and he was working at a plantation. And I told Jamie, I said, "Won't you take this dog back with you?" That was the end of December. And he took him to the plantation and flocked him with some other dogs, let him knock and chase. And I got him back during the National. So he was with Jamie from December to February before it was turning to be his first birthday.
Cool.
And then he went north. I can take you, a matter of fact, I sprinkled some of his ashes where he first place he ever pointed a sharp-tailed grouse.
How cool.
Yeah, 2 different places. My favorite place is in Service, North Dakota, up on some big hills, and then the other half went right where he pointed his first sharp tail. But he had a great personality, a unique look.
Yeah, unique. I just remember him being like a piebald looking dog. He just solid white body, solid white head, and then those 2 liver ears or whatever color they were. You could pick him out, in a lineup really easy, uniquely kind of marked.
Yeah, he had. I tell you, he was. I was working him at Mr. Farrell Miller's, and he was running all over. Mr. Farrell made a statement of how attractive he was moving and his gait and everything, and he was running pretty big. And Mr. Farrell said, "You need to crank down on him, being out of jack, and you need to get on to him. You need to start getting into him now." And I did. And if there was a negative early, he might have been a little bit on the short side, and he always just did enough. The best part about it is I had a very, very supportive owner on that dog.
Right.
I would tell him, just wait, and the rest is history. We won runner-up in Canada with him, and then placed him in Canada, won probably the last Manitoba championship that he'll ever run.
Yeah, 2020, I think.
And he had, I think it was 10 wins that year that he won the Preen Award. And like I said earlier, he was a Joe Hurdle Award also, award winner.
Randy, he won all 4 championships he was entered in the 2019-2020 season. And that was the Oklahoma, the Manitoba, the Southland, and the Quail Invitational. It's one thing to get a championship throughout the year, but it's another one to knock off all 4 that you're in. And that's just unbelievable. And here's another dog that wins from the prairies in Canada. He goes to Oklahoma and wins the Oklahoma championship in 2018 or 2019, and then goes on to start cementing this career. But what I find interesting is he made his first appearance at Ames, I believe, in 2020. How old was he when he first went to Ames?
I believe he was either 6 or 7.
Wow.
Yeah, and he had won the Oklahoma championship back to back. He 2 years in a row.
Oh, okay, back to back. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, all right.
And he went 3 hours. And we were very, very. We didn't win it.
Right.
And we've been asking. There's no need to go into hash over anything. It's opinions.
Right.
But I mean, to watch a dog get it out in those conditions. He had a very dear friend of mine who's a client also. When he talks about that performance, and he's a big, strong guy, there's tears that comes in his eyes.
Amazing.
And it was an exhausting 3 hours, but to watch that dog get it out, is unbelievable. And he was bred very little, and maybe I hate tooting somebody's on it, but one of the best dogs I've seen in my 42 years of career is out of him.
Yeah.
At this particular stage of life is Haney Stormwarning.
Absolutely.
And today I just seen where he had won the Hill Creek Open, and a week ago we won Region 5, and it ain't going to end. I mean, it's going
you were waiting for this dog to cool off, and it's just not going to happen. And I had several friends at the Invitational last year that got to watch him run. And I mean, if they could have put their jaw dropped in a text message, they would. And I wrote down a cool note here that I want to share with you with regards to Valiant as a sire, because it's clear now that Valiant could be one of these specimens that makes his mark on the breed and really starts to set the bar with regards to production, the dogs that we're going to see in the next generations of competition. He sired the 2022 All-America Derby champion and the runner-up champion there out at Pyramid, and in the dog that you just mentioned, Haney Stormwarning, who won it, and I'm Gallant, who you handled. So he sires both of those dogs that win, what I assume is a hot contested Derby again. He's established Haney Stormwarning as this potential giant in our sport. It looks like it's going that way. But then in the same year, he sired the Don Fox Open Derby winners in Missouri, with Stormwarning again winning that, and Knight's Little John, who won that. And then, funny enough, at that same trial at the Missouri Open Championship, you won it with Bonner's Bulletproof and got runner-up with Touch's Fireaway. Is that as satisfying as it sounds to have this dog that you've had your hands on, that you developed, that you campaigned, that you believed in, to not only do what he did while in competition, but now passing on these coveted genetics that look like is going to make waves in our sport?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the breeder comes out in me. When I was a firefighter, I was a breeder, and was trying to develop dogs and, to try to pay for my field trial. And so the breeder never comes out of me. I mean, I'm a big fan of Storm Warning. I want to beat him, but I'm proud when he wins.
Sure.
And, to correct you on something, I think we touched base on it. Knight's Hill Little John he's not out of value.
Oh, okay. I thought he was.
No, he was. I'm not sure what he's out of. He was developed by Ike. That might have been a misprint.
Okay.
But I think he did place in that field trial, but I think it would have been Ike Todd, and he may be Speed Dial or something, which is that Happy Jack line.
There we go again, another dog that you've had in your string.
Yeah, and it's Bonner's Bulletproof out of Happy Jack, and yeah, winning those back-to-back trials are hard. I won the Kansas one time with no runner-up with Aaron Southern Pride. Those are great accomplishments. But yeah, the breeder part of it, and the Sea Dogs, no more than Valiant was bred. I mean, the Region 7 walking shooting dog champions out of him, belongs to Mr. Sauer. I think that dog's name is KC's Tie One on One or something. Tie One on. Yeah. KC's Tie One on is, that's a walking champion out of Valiant.
Oh, yeah. That's Ken Sauer's dog.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a list of winners. But I tell you, another thing that's going to be an impact, just like the dog that placed here in the Derby. I've got 2 derbies right now, one out of Fireaway and another one out of a dog that an owner had that we at Dixon's Rolling Stone, but they're both out of Valiant females. I think the Valiant female line is going to have an impact also. And there's probably more of them out there than there are males that's going to be ran. So. Right.
And that's the sign, Randy, of in my book, a potent sire. It's one thing, it's like in the horse world, we do have stallions that throw colts, and some stallions just throw good fillies. But the ones that throw both, and then those females go on to be matriarchs of broodmare families, in the same way brood bitch families, that's how a sire has stuck in my book, is when they not only just get, stud dog after stud dog. Anybody can stand a stud dog. But it's that brood bitch female, that blue hen, that everybody wants a pup out of. That's how to me, that a sire really stuck.
That's one thing I learned, from John Criswell is, you're in the racehorse industry. Is behind them good sires, you'll see them blue hen females every time.
Absolutely.
At least the majority of the time. And I'll tell you another thing about sires that you got to have likeness to that sire too to get that type dog. And if he's a livered up rebel dog and you're trying to breed a rebel dog and they come out Snow White, you didn't get a rebel dog.
That's exactly right, Randy. That's exactly right. And it's the same kind of concept when I'm looking at horses and yearlings especially. I really want to see either the sire or the dam come out. I want to see one or two in that frame because, true or not, it makes you at least feel like that whatever genetic material is there on the sire or dam side, one of those came through with the aesthetic part of it.
Yeah, the best part about what you're doing and what we do, I mean, at least a horse you're looking at the individual that's going to drop, where you got a litter of maybe 8.
Yeah,
that's going to be a throwback to something in that pedigree.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
it's bad enough to try to pick one out of a litter of 8 that's going to be the competitor, but picking one yearling out of one mare, I mean, it is what it is. It's not like you got 7 others to look over. That's another point. And I do want to correct myself, Randy. I just conferred with my staff here, my research staff, which consists of myself. And Knight's Little John is by Lester's Storm Surge, and it was a typo in the field that I had found that. So, but Scott Griffin, I think, owns that dog as well too.
Oh yeah.
So another tie with you right there. But so that's Valiant in the history books. We've got another dog though that's going to live forever in the history books, and that's 7-time champion, 7-time runner-up champion, Hall of Famer, Miller's Happy Jack. He's by Lester's Bandit out of Twist, which was that champion Miller's White Powder female named Twist. The accolades for this dog too, they just go on and on. Correct me if I'm wrong, was he a full brother to 310 to Yuma?
No, his sire was.
His sire was. Okay. I knew there was a connection there somehow, but he was runner-up at the Dominion Chicken, and he was a champion in Mortlack, like you said earlier, that they don't even run anymore. Runner-up at the Quail Invitational, behind, like you said, Weldon Bennett's Coldwater Warrior that year. This dog is very, very, very special to you, Randy, and we spent a lot of time in the lead-up to this talking about him, and I can see why, but there was this haze or this kind of stigma around Happy Jack that he wasn't maybe the easiest of customers to deal with. He was maybe a little bit self-employed, but when you look at these accomplishments, you wouldn't think that that's maybe the case. So clearly you and Happy Jack got along. How did you do that?
Well, a little of it, was try to look at the whole picture, what might have caused, the self-employment. And I've always said a dog, is going to leave you, run off or whatever you want to say, for 2 reasons, either to self-hunt or to escape pressure. And so the thing that I figured we needed to do is take some of the pressure off and try to have more engagement, with a dog and try to build a rapport, but not to where he's taking advantage. And I know that might sound funny, but, our whole world is protected by a dog. It's been lured by either food or a tennis ball or some type of, that's protecting you and I and everybody around us, right now. And so I take a little bit of that. And through high school, I was involved with a guy who trained some working dogs for the Tulsa Police Department. But I take a little bit of that and use it on some of these dogs. But I did on him, moved him in the house, He had rules,
Wow.
and there was rumors where he was sleeping in a bed and all that stuff. None of that is correct. But we did have to take an approach. And approach, he had gone through a lot of long heating, and what I mean by that, I mean they would keep him down on the ground a long time, and we did too. That was part of the regiment. But we kept it mixed up. We may have a good workout where he had a find or two in 30 minutes, or it may have been 15 minutes, pick him up, put him in a rodent harness. But everything was positive and trying to get an engagement. Walk in a kennel, if he turned, take the dog pan, make him come around you. He had to always look at me to get his food. He had to work for it. We had to engage, and that's the way he ate. He wasn't on welfare. Didn't throw it down there and just let him eat it. And
super interesting.
It was an approach I hadn't taken much of, but we did take a different approach then. But try to be his buddy. It did wear off some as time went on, but he did what he wanted to do. But we did have a lot of success with him, and we believed that he would be a sire. They didn't breed to him much that year or two before we ended up getting him. He produced champions.
Yeah.
Before we had him also. So that. But those Stroud dogs like that is you follow the horse industry. The best sires that I've been associated with were almost outlaws, if not outlaws.
Yeah, that's really interesting though. And I had a conversation about Dr. Stan Wynn somewhere along those lines, and you take those attributes, and although that's not necessarily desirable, but chances are when you breed, things regress towards the mean. And that dog may be an outlier in the sense that he runs off the edge of the earth every time he's cut loose. But chances are there's a good chance that his progeny or some of his progeny are going to regress towards the mean. And when that happens, you're going to get something that's manageable or a little bit more desirable than what the sire is.
Yeah, it's a breed down deal. It's hard to throw one as strong as the individual.
Right.
And, and not to take anything away from the shooting dogs or anything, but that, in the past, that's why a lot of, everybody was breeding to an all-age dog to try to get their shooting dogs. And,
sure.
And I'm going back a while. Rebel Hawk is in a lot of pedigrees, and he had one runner-up championship on him. He wasn't a champion, but he, from Whippoorwill Rebel, Mortlack, a lot of those Rebel dogs, you'll see Rebel Hawk in there. And he wasn't a popular breeding dog either. That just kind of come, but he was an outlaw. He won runner-up in the Continental. His runner-up was a good one. But the Ironclad, I was trying to stand the Ironclad as a stud, and John Criswell told me that I was promoting him as a stud dog, that he wouldn't be a breed-on type dog. I didn't pay much attention to him, and we bred several females to him, and he didn't produce. He produced some, but not like I figured he would, being a Mortlack son. He was almost all white with some orange markings. And Robin had won some stuff with him. We got him back to breed to him after even his retirement. Actually, he lived the rest of his life at Abergale Plantation with Tom Shanker.
Cool.
But he didn't have likeness to that pedigree, the delivered spots. David Williams had a dog named Rebel Mischief out of Mortlack that looked like a Ramblin' Rebel, maybe been colored up more. And he was a champion producer. And because he had the look of the pedigree.
Sure.
And so that's enough of really, I don't want to bore anybody on the breeding part of it, but that's the way I've always seen it. And it's pretty much, if you look at it, that's the way it's always done too.
Yeah. And, breeding and Miller's Happy Jack, they go hand in hand. Jack, as a sire, just to mind, he's the sire of national champion Miller's Dialing In and grandsire of Dunn's Tried and True, and I think Miller's Speed Dial. So, those genetics obviously are potent, and they're going to carry through and help fill out pedigrees from here, there, and yonder. But, that's one prefix dog that's been good to you, but there's another prefix line of dogs, Randy, that's also been good for you. And the first one I want to bring up to you is Touches Adam County, or Bo, as you know him, who come out of that Keith Wright, Ike Todd program in about 2013, I think, when he hits his string. And then it's just off to the races after that. I believe he was the 2013, 2014 Purina Award Dog of the Year, another Joe Hurdle Award winner, multiple champion, 2013 Quail Invitational champion. He got it done. I know he was runner-up in Manitoba at least. And, one of the stats that I like about your dogs and other dogs is how many times they ran at Ames. And this is a dog that, could have rented a condo down there at Grand Junction because he ran 7 times at Ames.
Yeah, he, even right before his retirement, he placed in a Cajun. When he had some age on him, and his personality was a little different than some. He was kind of a cold dog. He wasn't shy or nothing, but you probably heard this before. You could bring Jack in a motel or put him in the truck or bring him in the house, and you'd think you had a poodle. He'd curl up on a bed or get in a dog bed. Adams County, just stand there looking.
Yeah,
he was froze. And you try to warm up and make him stand there. He just never did like it. He just assumed you're not petting.
Yeah, I've got one like that, and it's so interesting. He doesn't hate you, and it's not like he doesn't like you. It's just like you're just not a big deal to him, and he doesn't need his head scratched, and he don't need you to pay attention to him. It's not that he's ignoring you. He's just kind of on his own.
No, and that type dog, you try to warm up to him, and you try to let them start jumping up on you or doing different things, and next thing you know, they're coming unglued on you. They'll take advantage of you.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is let them be themselves and continue your balance. You need to be balanced through your program.
Right.
Not all these dogs, every one of them are different. And their eating habits. I mean, if you're feeding 4 cups, the majority of them's getting 4 cups, but some of them don't. Some of them's getting this, some of them's getting that.
Sure.
And but every one of them's got some tendencies that we've got to try to deal with, and that was one of his. Is keep him in the kennel, and don't let him jump. I can use that as an example. Let him go to jumping up on you and trying to be your buddy, jump up here, good boy, and feed him a weenie.
Yeah.
Next time out, he reared back and knocked him.
Yeah.
End up getting back into him, letting him be himself, and didn't have no problem. He wasn't a great backer, but he either was Jack. But you just got to deal with those type dogs. If he'd have been cold because he didn't back, there wouldn't be no Happy Jack.
Yeah, and those alphas, some of those alphas have a tendency to be that way. If they were a pack, dogs like them would probably be the pack leader, and I think that's why sometimes their mannerisms are kind of oriented that way. But there's another dog as we kind of go down the shed row, Randy, another Touches dog, the 2020-2021 Purina Dog of the Year award winner here again, another Joe Hurdle award winner, out of a Quail Invitational winner in House's Ring of Fire, and that's Touches Fireaway, multiple champion. 2021 winner of that Invitational, won all the way down in Alabama in that Open All-Age Championship. I think he won that twice, a runner-up at that coveted Mid-America, and a champion and runner-up at the Missouri Open All-Age Championship. And this has been a program in a line of dogs and breedings and people, that have been really good for your program, this dog too.
Yeah, the Keith Wright breeding program and the ICTOD development, I'd stand in line all day long, and I've always liked the Ring and Fire dogs because Keith and I've talked about it. I like that hustle. They can be a little mean. I'm not talking about mean about growly.
Oh, I know what you mean.
They're a little hard to break. But, man, one thing you do get out of them is you get that hustle. You get that pop, that fire, that high cracking tail, and that desire to go hunt and find game. And the rest of it you can mold. But that Keith is, I could sit here all night long. But that combination between him and Ike, it's unmatched. I mean, I sit here and look at this field trial that I'm setting at, and the ones that have an Ike-Todd connection is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that'll end up being another podcast one of these days, I'm sure, so I won't touch on it. But,
yeah, right.
But that those touch dogs has been good. Spaceman died early, and he, I'd won with him in Canada, qualified for the Nationals as a first-year dog, and he was stout. He's another one that didn't have some of those Ring of Fire dogs were a little funny, and he was funny. I mean, they're not shy by no means, but they're not warm dogs. Now, right. Fireaway loves people.
Oh, interesting. Cool. That's neat.
He'll work for you. I mean, he's not a spaceman now. He could. I mean, he can knock the pine needles off these trees.
Well, what about a dog that Rick Peterson owned and put on your string for you? You bought him as a first year dog that later went on to be owned by John and Jackie Harkins, and that's Touches Blackout, who I think just recently passed away, maybe back in June and July, back at Keith's, where he kind of went, I guess, to live out his last few days or months or years or whatever it was. What about Touches Blackout?
He was good. Great edge running dog, great personality. He was one of the few champions out of Whiteout. And but he was out of a champion producing bitch. She produced champions out of Happy Jack, Game Point, and another one that was out of her. Trying to think of the other champion that was out of Happy Jack and her, and then bred to Touches Whiteout.
And Whiteout died way too early. Whiteout had a pretty good run at some of the stock that hit the ground while he was in his stud duties, but he died way too early, and I don't feel like we got the full effect of what he was capable of, as a sire.
No, that's exactly right. And he was that dog would work for you. I mean, he didn't have the greatest nose, and of any dog that I've had, but he put a lot of effort in finding game, and had an unusual marked head. But we had he had the invitational one, and it ended up I flushed a bird right underneath his belly with minutes to go, and that would have been another invitational win under our belt. But
wow.
2020. But that he was a real good dog, and the connection, Keith Wright and Ike Todd.
Yeah, there we go. Just the list of those dogs and their accomplishments just keeps going on and on.
I will add this. I want to add this. He said, we took him north, and Rick thought his career was over, because of age. And Jackie and John Harkin, I asked him if they'd give him one more chance around the block, and he had been setting. And I ended up just basically brushing him off, took him to the Hobart Ames, placed him, requalified him for the Nationals, won runner-up in Alabama, and then won the Missouri with him.
Wow.
the year before he was retired.
Unreal.
And ran him 2 hours and 50 minutes or something in the national championship.
Yeah, cold off the shelf. Unbelievable. Well, just, that's genetics. That goes back to genetics, and you've either got that or you don't. Randy, another dog that ran at Ames 7 times that I'm impressed with. But this dog, he completed the 3 hours pretty much every year or every other year and never went birdless. And I think in 2017 or 2018, Lester's Jazzman had 8 or 9 finds, and I'll never forget that because I'd always check the website of an evening. And when I saw that, it was just, you're blown away when a dog goes through that 3 hours in those conditions and puts together a performance like that, which is satisfying in itself. But another Alabama championship winner and a runner-up in back-to-back years, 2-time winner of the Oklahoma, son of Lester Snowwatch. But for you, his name was Lester's Jazzman.
Tough. I mean, the unfortunate part, he was sterile. And I would have, if there was a breeding dog that I thought that would compare to some of those that we've already discussed, he might have passed them. That's easy to say when we never will know. But I can tell you this: he was one of the toughest dogs that, as far as heat, could run injured, and he on his bottom side. I mean, he was out of Snowwatch, but he was a great bird finder that you've already touched on. But on his bottom side, he was silver bullet and white powder close. I think his mama was out of powder and out of a bullet female. And, those are some old Miller bloodlines that brought us to where we are, and they were close.
Yeah.
That's what I always wanted to breed. We tried everything. I sent him out to Kansas. We tried different type of supplements, and we've took him to different vets. I would have wouldn't say killed to that a puppy out of him, but I'd loved to seen that dog been bred to.
And Randy, another dog that you said left you too early, and that was Touch's Spaceman. And I remember him winning the first 2 trials he was entered in as a first-year dog, and you couldn't help but think that the horizon was never ending for this dog. And he didn't win the Quail Invitational, but he did win the Quail Classic there in Kentucky. And he ran at Ames twice, and I think in 19 or 20 or whatever those years he was at Ames, he had 5 finds and finished the 3 hours. And I believe he was a litter mate to Touch's Gallatin Fire. I can't remember, but okay, yeah. But this was another dog too that just was hot off the press and seemed to be going just anywhere he wanted to, and then sadly you lost him way too early.
Yeah, he was. I already told you. he was tough. He had a different personality. Got a good. He's a great client to of mine even today. He owns Touch's Cocaine Blues, who's another Ring of Fire dog, but he's a young dog. I won runner up with him recently in Reno in the California Quail. But that the Spaceman was he would have had a great career. I mean, they're not pulling some kind of curtain down, but that dog was on his way to winning a lot of championships. But he was going to he required a lot of work, lot of work, just like Jazzman did. To work Fireaway doesn't take that kind of work. It just same bloodline, same genetics, just different individuals.
Yeah, just a different rendition of what those genetics have in store and how they can come out and present themselves. Let's get a little bit more recent on the string though, Randy. A dog that's the Missouri Open Championship, and I believe was the first dog to qualify for that 2023 national kind of winning your in rule that they put in place. Bonner's Bulletproof or Bo, and he's won out at Oklahoma, got runner up at the Oklahoma Championship, and was second at the Quail Classic that I can remember by Speed Dial, and who's another dog that you ended up acquiring and have on your string for a period there of time. Tell us about Bonner's Bulletproof and where this dog's going to go.
He's a good dog. He's got of course he's out of a Happy Jack female, so the genetics, he's line bred to Jack. He's a good sized dog, good nose. Derek Bonner says, you hear those stories about, the dog pointed the first bird he ever smelled.
Yeah. Derek
says that one right there was one of the first ones he ever had that did it.
Wow.
And he is a good bird dog, and he works with you good too. He's owned by a great, a dentist, and has been an owner of mine for a long time, Dr. Corman. And I think the dog's got a great future. We got to get him back at Grand Junction. He's the kind of dog that I can win that trial with.
Oh, cool. Yeah, well, that's enough to whet your palate there, especially coming from a guy like you that's had so many run there and seen so many run there. But what about acquiring Bonner's Bulletproof sire, Miller Speed Dial? He was, we know him from 2020 when he won the national championship with Gary, and he ran 4 other times at Ames. But his last time was with you, and I can remember when that kind of come across the wire that now Randy Anderson had Miller Speed Dial, but he was acquired by one of your owners, Mick Marietta, who's been, a supporter of the NBHA in various capacities. But he went under your whistle as a 7-year-old, and he finished the 3 hours at Ames under you. That's drama in the field trial world that a dog like that would transfer hands like that. Tell me a little bit about acquiring Speed Dial.
Well, Mick bought him. Mick has also world-class bird dogs, and
yes,
first of all, they wanted. He loves that type dog. The strength. He loved that pedigree. Mick's not new to the field trial world. He'd won the Prairie Dog of the Year with Stacy Perkins with the world-class. I went blank on the registered name of that dog, but they'd won the shooting dog top dog award, and so he wasn't new to the sport. But they had acquired a lot of females, and they have a program where they're developing dogs. And he purchased him for the breeding part of it. And of course, him being a national champion and to continue on his career. I'm thankful he gave us the opportunity. And as we're speaking, he's, been trying to get him delivered to us to work here on a couple of plantations for a few days try to get him ready. If I think he may be the next dog up at the Invitational.
No,
if
really?
somebody drops out. Yeah, I talked to Mary Sue earlier, and she said he's the next dog up. So, we don't want anything bad to happen to anybody's dog. But our fingers crossed that maybe one of them females will come in season or something. I don't even know if there's
That's the nice way of hoping you get a spot.
But yeah, that if we get a spot, that we'll give him another opportunity. He's been there, and I think he's even one runner up there. I'm not for sure about that. You may know more about that than me, but the last year we got him ready quick, and we won with him, won first with him in the national qualifying stake in Conway, which that's tight country in Arkansas, and then we placed him at Guy and Burke Hendricks' place also. But he he's got those same genetics, through the Happy Jack line and some of the same traits, but he's a good sire also.
Right. And he was purchased largely in part too for that reason. There's hopes and there's belief that he will be a stamp in the breed and the pointer. And Mick's looking down the line, I'm sure, as this dog is a long staple in his stud kennel there, and I'm sure we'll see that later on down the line. And Randy, that's just a list of a cavalcade of dogs that you've had your hands on or a part in that you've been successful with. And now I just want to throw some questions at you and just let you riff a little bit. There's those dogs and the competitors and the classes of dogs they competed with. You've seen the pointer and the setter throughout time, especially on the horseback circuit in all age ranks. But how has the field trial dog changed from those early days of Randy getting his feet wet in the trial world to now? How has our field trial dog evolved over that time?
Well, country's changed too. I don't, there's not a lot of difference. The all age dogs, a lot of it's the judging. I mean, there's a lot of fine counters. When I first got started, all you needed was an all age dog. Show me you can point a bird and be broke. Show me the race. It was all about the race. And that's the way it should be. And I mean, if there's any argument, if there's anything that may be hurting our sport, could be the judging, not being cricket or anything like that, just lack of knowledge.
It is a hard pill to swallow, though, Randy. I think maybe you'd agree, maybe not, for people that aren't familiar with the all age ranks, because a bird dog should be what it is in its name. But what separates the all age dog from a lot of our other dogs is this unbelievable and almost abnormal ability to carry itself at long distances while working for the handler and pointing birds. And I think by saying the most important, or one of the most important attributes of an all-age dog is race, it's really the efforts in preserving that unique talent or that unique trait. Is that right?
Exactly. I mean, even, let's go all the way back to where I got started with National Bird Hunters. It was a quality. It was in the bylaws, quality, not quantity. And if there's anything that's changed at every level, I'm not sure, I can't speak for the National Bird Hunters, but at our level, 3 beats 1. That's easy. Anybody, one old timer told me one time, the way it looks like now, all you need is one of those clickers like an umpire has.
A pitch counter.
I even heard one old timer say, my granddaughter can count to 3. But you got to be able to separate these dogs, and so many people aren't bird hunting anymore, like a lot of us grew up doing. So they lack that knowledge. But the all age dog was all about the race, and that's one reason why I did it, because I like that power dog.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of difference. I mean, some of the dogs in some of these shooting dog strains could win right here, and they're stout, pretty dogs, and maybe the future of the sport. Bernie told me before he sold, before the transition from the UKC to the American field, that we would all maybe in the parking lot together one day.
Yeah.
And that would be true. He said he hoped it wasn't under his watch. Well, it's not going to be now because he's not there, but sure. I believe that it may be sooner than we might anticipate, but it may not be a bad deal, because it would be the shooting dog deal right now is in good shape. I think the National Bird Hunter growth, and I think there's a lot of people has to have an entry level.
Yeah.
I mean, I can sit here and name off several people that started in the National Bird Hunters, including myself. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have been introduced to the field trial game or had an opportunity at all if I wouldn't have jumped in it with both feet and got addicted.
Right.
And it turned into an obsession, and 40-some years down the road, here I'm still doing some of the same stuff. But, the thing that amazes me is, our trips north and everything is the same thing they did in the 1920s. And they were probably saying the exact same thing that I'm saying right now.
Yeah, sure. And, it's a pursuit. It's a pursuit of people, first and foremost, to grow our sport and our game, and we need entry points. But I made the comment to you on the phone that, now more than ever, we've got a lot of people that make their living on the NBHA circuit. And you said, yeah, it was that way too. And I just see the National Bird Hunters Association early on as this place just for bird hunters to have something to do with their dogs outside their hunting season. And that's very much true then, and it very much is true now. But we're people that thrive on competition, or we wouldn't do this. And we just want to know where our dogs stack up and where we stack up with our breeding, our training, and our handling and stuff. And it serves the same purpose as it did then. And we were talking about preserving the all age dog, Randy. And I saw a quote, and don't quote me on the gentleman's name, but I think it was a gentleman by the name of John Little. And he made this quote at the All-American that you heard or said to somebody. And he said, "Boys, if you think you got a broke derby here and you're winning it, you're probably not."
It was was at the All-American in Kennebec, South Dakota, which was early on.
Yeah.
And that, he was an old, I mean, he's passed. He was from South Carolina. But them old trainers, I mean, that's one thing that the sport's changed. And training techniques change too. I mean, equipment, the collars, the whole nine yards, and the ways that some of us take a different approach. And, through the negative reinforcement or contact by association and stuff that, would go over some of their head. But, like I said, Bud Epperson kicked out broke derbies in a walking trial back in 1981.
Wow.
For being too broke. And John Little says the same thing. And that's been within the last 15 years. John Little did not want to see a broke derby on the prairie.
Wow.
And Ben, who was a dear friend of mine, told me one time he hated judging derbies on the prairie because the one he liked probably hadn't been worked.
That's a good
if you've
point.
been working, they're going to be a little short. And but we've created that. I mean, you get beat by one that was standing there winging shot.
Right.
You got to either do it or get out.
And it snowballs. It starts that snowball effect where you have to have a broke derby too. And I made a note of that because I appreciated that. I'm in the camp that derbies should be as raw as possible. It should look like they've got some fingerprints on them, but they've not got grip marks on them. And they should be they're judged all across the board. I believe derbies are supposed to be judged on potential, but it's just like what John Little was getting at in his quote there, and the other examples you give. You can't judge potential when it's already crafted or it's already been molded or it's already sculpted. You can't judge potential because it's not there anymore. It's a finished product. And I think I agree with you on the same plane as we've kind of lost or are losing that. And some people are holding true to that and good on them. But yeah, derbies and broke derbies, hotly contested thing. And I've heard people say countless times, if I bring a derby to trial, it's going to be broke, like it or not. And that's fine. That's your own prerogative. But those derbies are supposed to be judged on potential.
You're exactly right. I mean, and that's what the standard says is potential. But it's also been proven in modern time and that it can be done. The dogs with the touch prefix that you mentioned, and Haney Storm Warning. I mean, he's a true end of the March, registered whelp dog. And, you hear all this stuff about aging and all that. I know his birthday, I'm Gallant, is the end of April. And, but training techniques and stuff's changed, equipment's changed. So it can be done. I mean, the breaking these dogs and doing stuff, and a lot of it is engagement.
Right.
But the old timers, it was different. I mean, they did not want to see a dog that had been overworked as a derby.
Sure. And Randy, people want to know, the ins and outs of what some of our top echelon competitors do when it comes to training and techniques and methods and tools and stuff like that. And I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole because, you open up a can of worms and then, it's just one of those things. But I would like to hear you give me that 30,000-foot view of your philosophy when it comes to training dogs. If you had to kind of explain to somebody the Randy Anderson method or approach or technique without going into great details, how would you describe your approach or your theory on training?
Well, it's, kind of contact by association, just like horse training, pressure and release. And, we've always tried to, in the development or training part, or even if we're going back in to try to get on an older dog in his mind, is try to get engagement and, try to get that dog to focus more on what he's supposed to be doing. But we teach and reinforce with the e-collar. And, we don't use the e-collar so much as a teaching tool. You try to conform that with a rope, with a check cord. Once the dog knows it, and then, being from the Smiths, it's a silent, you teach it, and then you name it. We don't make woe being a bad word. And whether you're using a flank collar, you got to have that pressure and release around the flank before you put that collar on. He needs to know how to shut that pressure off before you add any type of stimulation. And, negative reinforcement, people think is something harsh. I mean, negative reinforcement, if I holler, whoa, in a stout demeanor,
right,
that's negative reinforcement.
Right.
It's not a flush and whip or anything like that, but just trying to be positive, keeping the dog engaged. And I'm always trying to learn. And Mr. Miller said one time, what works for some people may not work for us.
Right.
But we always, the flank collar is our brakes, and the neck collar is our steering wheel, and basically the flank collar is to take chase. But it's the main thing is positive, and the other thing is we try to stay balanced. I think you can have too much running with no birds, or maybe too many birds and no running, too much roding and not enough work. I've been told we need to work their mind, not their muscles.
Yeah.
But, whether you're a retriever trainer, a working dog trainer, a police dog trainer, you have to stay balanced. And that's probably one of the key things I always tell people is to try to stay balanced.
It makes a lot of sense. And it goes across other disciplines with other animals too, horses especially. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and this will go along with that. They were asking about just format and field trials. And I kind of told them that a field trial is like, theater. You have the main star, which are the dogs, and you've got the producer, the director, which are the handlers, and then you've got supporting actors. And those supporting actors, in a roundabout way, are your scout and, the horses that you're setting on. And I think I think it would be worthwhile to hear somebody like you talk about how important both of those supporting roles are, not only in a brace and in a particular run or trial, but in your operation to have a good scout or the availability of a good scout and to set on good horses. How important are those things?
Well, you got to be well mounted, and it's hard to win a field trial on a colt, but it takes so long to make a dog horse. I mean, I could get you I can find you a good dog prospect a lot easier than I can a good field trial horse prospect. But
wow,
to answer your question is it's a team effort, and that horse and that dog being just what you said. You got everybody, but that scout, if that scout's been working with that dog and knows that dog, that's real important. And I've always been a firm believer, and there's nothing wrong with it, and they do it throughout the country. But I've always tried to have somebody pretty much full time that's been a part of those dogs, and that way they know every tendency. And a dog depends on us for food. The person feeding them is the one that they associate with, and so I try to, and so much at that feed pan. If a dog's feeling right,
yeah,
he's a little off or something the way he eats,
right.
And so if you've got somebody that's a part of that team that knows those same tendencies, it helps you, get on through to, hey, this dog's off, or I think we may have an issue here. We need to get to a vet, but it's still a key out there in the field to try to win a field trial too. You got to, it's a team effort, and they're on your team. You always said, the Dallas Cowboys not going to loan their quarterback to, the Redskins.
No. or now the Commanders or whatever that, they're messing with our teams now. I mean, you can't even make those analogies anymore. There is a thing though that needs to be mentioned, because our sport is desperate for these people, and we need to champion these people more than we do. And that's our owners. And Randy, you've got this steady and such a good roster of owners that have helped put these dogs in these places in the annals of history. And we know that you have to have owners to run a business. That goes without saying. But how critical is it to not just have owners, but good owners to be successful at the top level?
Well, an old saying is, what's better than a good dog is a good owner. I mean, a good owner is going to make sure you got the right dog. I mean, he wants a good one. And these owners are so supportive, not just to the individuals, dog trainers that are in that program, but they're a key to our sport. There needs to be probably more done to, for our owners than they're getting. Because one time we had a huge audience. Everybody had a bird dog. And, the publications and stuff, there was Jack Harper or Leon Covington was in Life magazine, and dogs were in Life magazine. And there was a lot more following to our sport. I was told it's the oldest competitive sport in the United States.
Yeah. I've also seen that. And in my mind, Randy, I'm in horse racing to a certain degree, and this field trial game, and there's so much crossover there, albeit at different levels. But we have people in our field trial game like the Hamiltons that have dogs on the all-age circuit. John Fort, who's had dogs on the circuit. Carl Bowman, who's also been in the thoroughbred world. These are guys that kind of dabble in both or have at certain times. And it's just proof to me that this sport, maybe we take for granted how big this really was and maybe could be if we prop up these owners a little bit more. And we give them more of a platform and make it a bigger deal. Now, Randy Anderson wants to see his picture, I'm sure, at the winner's podium and stuff, but nothing is better for Randy's business, for his owners to get some recognition, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and without having the ink like we had in the past, that's harder. So there's got to be some type of format to bring this back to a podium. But that, the future of field trials, and one reason why we're in North Carolina is because of the Jamboree. And I think the future of field trials is to make it more of an event. I mean, we see it in the coonhound industry. We see it, and look what they've done to bull riding with the PBR.
Yeah.
The retriever world. I mean, the Super Retriever Series, things that's been on television, make dog trainers into NASCAR drivers. And you got to have a podium. And I was with an organization on a pro staff, and they that was one of the things that the marketing company that was hired to do it for them was to put us on a podium. If we're not doing good, that product's not going to be doing good. And
exactly.
I think some of these events that's being sponsored, we'll see that sponsorship start dwindling because they're not getting a bang for their buck. And it's the same thing kind of for an owner. If they're not getting a bang for their buck, they'll end up doing something else. They got to have the love and the passion for the sport to continue. And we need to grow this sport. It's a great sport. Someone's asked me one time, I told them, I said, I'm a competitive person, always have been. I've never not remember owning a horse. I mean, I've owned one my entire life that I can remember. Same thing with a sporting dog. And I love the outdoors, and it's everything wrapped up into one.
Yeah, it's the marriage of those things, and add the competition side, the competitive nature of yourself in that too. Where are you going to find that triad of things that are near and dear to your heart? Where are you going to find that where that meshes?
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, we see stuff that we take for granted. I've seen some mule deer in Canada that were unbelievable. And this list goes on and on and on,
Yeah.
different things that people would love to see or never have an opportunity that we see while we're out there. But the main thing, it's about the dog, and that performance of that dog. And I've seen some great ones, I've watched Dishon's Go Boy in the National Amateur Quail Championship, and I know that was unbelievable. And it stays in my mind. It's instilled. And then I've tried to match it with some, and I probably have, but that was in my younger day and just getting started. It's etched in there more than probably any of them that I've done. And actually, that dog ended up knocking a prairie chicken with a few minutes to go and didn't even win.
Oh.
But it was a heck of a performance. It had everybody in the, standing up in their saddle. But, it's we anything that we can encourage, these youth trials have been that can build some interest as these youngsters continue to go from youth to adult. But, we need some people now.
Yeah. And we talked to you about the importance that I've kind of pushed onto some of our members and tried to blow this trumpet a little bit louder is stakes at our walking trials, like gun dog stakes or judgment ceases at flush, where you can bring that meat dog and throw him on the ground and at least have a good day, but also might find out that dog's better than what you thought, or it stacks up better, or then maybe just give yourself that justification that maybe a little bit of what you're doing when it comes to training and breeding and stuff, and just to see if that interest will grow any from that experience. But it's getting those people in the door. But by having people like you on here, we also want to show people that this can turn into something far beyond what you'd even thought would happen. I don't imagine that Randy Anderson, who's got the bird hunting dog and he's just out, looking for coveys, would one day find himself at the Carolina Jamboree amongst some of the best dogs in the country, doing this for a living and handling dogs in the history books and those things. But it's just proof that if you'll just go and do it and give it a try and put aside everything else, you might uncover something that might be a lifetime of memories and a passion.
Absolutely. And that guy or gal or a youngster that brought that cease to flush dog, all of a sudden he wants to be more competitive and he reaches out and gets him a better dog.
Right.
It's a stepping stone, and the National Bird Hunter Organization is very important, but it also was a stepping stone for somebody to move on into different avenues. Sean Kinkler's grandfather, if I'm not mistaken, and uncle, Chamberlains were their last name, and I may be corrected on that, but they, there probably wouldn't have been a Sean Kinkler if there wasn't a National Bird Hunter Organization.
Wow. Really
the Chamberlains were very early, if not, the first directors for the National Bird Hunter Organization.
Cool. That's really neat how all that history goes back so far, but still has ties today that are so relevant. Randy, one thing that comes up with you in conversation over and over is history. You obviously are a person that's drawn to the game's history, and I think it's safe to say you romance over it. And there's people in this game that kind of fall along those same lines. Why is the history of this game so important to you specifically?
Well, tradition, history and is tradition, and people like Ches Harris. I've mentioned him a lot, but
yeah,
thing that was intriguing about him, of course, he was born in Holly Springs, Mississippi, but he ended up in my county where Delmer Smith's from, in Big Cabin. He worked for actually Pennzoil. C.E. Griffin took Mount Riga Farms to, there was 13 pro dog trainers that worked through Mount Riga in the 20s, including Dutch Epperson, which is Delmer Smith's father-in-law.
Wow.
And Ches Harris won the Nationals. He had his own car, railroad car, rented that hauled his dogs in Canada. And I've always been a fan of him. He was huge for that era. He was 6'6" and
larger than life.
And his brother-in-law ended up being a pro dog trainer that ended up with John Proctor. His name was Prather Robinson. And a lot of those family members are still kind of in our area. Most of them have died off, but Delmer can tell the stories. That's where a lot of my information's come from. But Ches Harris won the Nationals a lot. His camp was right across the border from where I'm at. He was in Pearson, Manitoba, but that's not far from Mantler, North Dakota. But I think about that trip in 1921 that I make in that truck, with Sirius satellite radio and air conditioning,
leather seats,
and a Model T, to work a bird dog.
Wow.
We're doing the exact same thing now, and probably having the same conversation as they were in 1921. They just wasn't getting to do it in a podcast.
Yeah. It was just out there in the air, in the crisp air, in the crisp Canadian air, and that's just where it lived. And that's why it's so important to me to get these things documented, get this history on some sort of medium. That way, people can, find it, discover it, revisit it, and attach themselves to it in some way. And Randy, you're in a position where words will mean a lot to people getting started or on the outside looking in, or that are looking to another level or another avenue in field trials. What advice would Randy Anderson give to new field trialers?
Well, if somebody's wanting to get in the sport, they need to pick up a phone and call somebody, that's involved, and let them guide you in a direction in a positive manner. And, everybody that I know that carries a title as a professional dog trainer is just that. And, they're all everybody's willing to help, whether they're a walking trainer or a sheepdog trainer and all these trainers, and they need to find a place where they want to be. You know, they may want to be a walking dog, field trialer, or a horseback, but you got to have guidance, you know, and learn. You know, the guy, a gentleman in the Hall of Fame, said he went to every camp he could in Canada to learn what to do and what not to do. There's a lot of truth to that. The more people you're around, but get involved. There used to be a lot more clubs. I don't know. Joplin, Missouri had a big club. There was a big club in Fayetteville, Arkansas during the National Bird Hunter. And, you know, join them clubs. I don't know if those clubs even exist anymore.
A lot of them still do, Randy. It's amazing, especially out there in the Midwest and stuff. Man, those clubs, they've got some serious history, and you know, there's generations of people in the same family that's now a part of them. And that's one thing that I've learned as I've kind of gotten deeper into the game and met some more of the characters and kind of been in and out of the system there is these are approachable people. You are a very approachable person. You might be busy when I call, or you know, you might have to talk later or whatever, just because that's the nature of your game and your business. But you're just like talking to anybody else. Like you're a normal guy, and you're going to have good opinions, good advice, and good help. And if you can't help somebody, I know you and like a lot of other people, you're going to steer them to somebody or someplace else that can. You're not going to leave them hanging. And I think that's one of the hurdles that people have to get over. You know, if they want to contact a pro or an established amateur stuff, you got to do it first and foremost. And you got to make that connection and start networking with people, because like a lot of other avenues and things in life, the field trial world is an incredibly networked system. And those people that are really good at it are almost always networked really well, like yourself.
Yeah, and that part, you know, has changed with social media and stuff. And that, I think the clubs, there needs to be a big ad campaign to get people more involved. I visited with some people with our newer, you know, with UKC and trying to pipeline people towards us. And there's some videos being made as we're speaking. We helped do some photo shoots and some video stuff during the national championship and went and set some stuff up. And they're trying to market our sport and going to get more involved, I think, in trying to help market with some videos.
Right.
The people that they got doing it are very knowledgeable. They've done some produced some fishing shows, and they're not new to the production world by no means. But our is so involved with it's been around so long, and we've lost a little bit of that exposure that we once was. I used to say you could probably go to downtown Memphis and start polling people about Grand Junction and the national championship, and they would have heard about it because they read about it in the commercial uphill newspaper.
Yeah.
Now you can probably go to Memphis or right here in where I'm at in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and they don't even know we exist. And that exposure needs to be brought out. I mean, I always said that, you know, the American Field should have been putting subscriptions that, you know, to where they could subscribe in doctor journals or, whatever. Not to say you had to be a doctor.
Sure.
They needed to get that exposure out to where people knew that we existed. So
right.
That's one thing. I mean, there was an equestrian magazine here that this is a big hunter jumper area. They were out there. I did a little interview with them for a story they're going to write. This guy was raised within 10 miles of that barn and had drove by that barn for years and didn't realize that these field trial grounds were set up for bird dog field trials.
Really?
That's kind of nationwide. If you ever try to explain to somebody what you do, you almost kind of give up.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. And it's part of one of my jobs with the NBHA is outreach, introduction, and hopefully residual of those people and retention, and explaining to the person with a blank slate with regards to field trials and maybe bird dogs as a whole. It's complex. And I think one of the things that makes it complex is we're a unique people, that we love animals, which isn't unique in itself, but what is unique is to be successful and to have a shot at a long term in this game, you have to love the work. You have to love to clean kennels. You have to love to do those chores that maybe, you know, get mundane or repetitious and stuff. Because if you don't love those things, or at least have a point in time in your life where you do love them, you can't really expect yourself to be the personality that survives the up and downs in this game. This game will knock you in the chin more times than it won't. But when you hit that peak, when you get that picture taken and it's in the field, that suffices and covers a lot of wrongdoings and a lot of mess ups and a lot of times where you didn't place. But you got to love that work. And you're clearly a hard worker. You've built your business on hard work and integrity and doing things right by your clients and the dogs you have. And Randy, let's look at the sport now as a whole, and let's look at it, you know, I don't know, a decade from now, 2 decades down the road. How does Randy Anderson see our great sport 20 years down the road?
Well, I was having the same conversation 20 years ago, and here we still are. I think it will continue on. I think that there needs to be more promotion for the sport, and I think these field trials need to be more of an event. And that my definition of that is there needs to be some chrome added back on, to some of these events. And I've seen drawings at, from the 1960s at the National Amateur Quail Championship, and there looks like there's 100 people dressed in a suit. Drawings used to be an event.
Yeah.
With electronics and stuff and the way we do things now, we we have a drawing at somebody's house and we go to the field trial and we get there and we get out and we run our dog and we go home. That didn't used to happen. You went to the field trial, you were there. And a lot of those drawings were done, the night before. It was part of the dinner or whatever. And really the drawing is the most important part of the field trial. And it is a minimum, it's a minimum requirement to be a sanctioned field trial. And, I look at some of these drawings and they're not out of the hat. And that it's the luck of the draw. And, if you hold one person out, the whole drawing's messed up. But
right.
That's just where we're at in our life. And there's a lot of them that I'm sure have been drawn correctly. But
right.
It just needs to be, these clubs and trying to grow these clubs. And a lot of these field trials are being put on by one or two people. And there needs to be an effort, a group of effort trying to promote our sport. And I've watched, the national bird hunters. It's almost like you watched your baby grow up because you were part of it. But I've seen it go up and down, and it looks like it's probably in our sport right now. It's grown more than the growth of it over the last few years is larger than any other part of our sport.
Yeah,
and I'm referring to shooting dog and all age. It's wonderful what you all are doing.
Well, thank you, and it's been exponential, the growth, but we're trying not to rest on those laurels, and we're trying to see this as a stewardship. The inception of this and its intentions and its purpose and the service it provides to our patrons and our sport. But we want the NBHA to help carry the load of the trial game itself into the future, and that's by help marketing. Help get new participants, new owners, finding people with a passion to maybe go professional, and helping harbor and promulgate those interests and those passions and stuff. And we're taking the lead from the generations of leaders before, and it's just so cool that you fall into that and still have a belief in that system and what it still stands for today. And I just want to thank you from my personal standpoint for coming on here and sharing these stories. And I feel like I've made a friend with you, and I've kept up with you for years, along with your other friends and patrons on the horseback circuit in the all age ranks. And it's so cool to sit down with some of you guys and get these stories and talk about these dogs and go to these trials and talk about, the impact that the game's had on your life. And you were a shoe in to do this podcast, and just so thankful you come on. Hopefully we'll have you on again sometime in the future, Randy. And just any parting thoughts that you'd have for our listeners as we close?
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate you, things like this is what brings exposure. And that's why anytime I've ever had an opportunity to get on a podium and talk about our sport, I try to take advantage of it. Yeah. Whether it's in writing or a podcast or an interview of any type, I feel like we all need to. And it's people like you and your organization that gets the word out there. And in today's time, there's no excuse for not being able to. And with the social media and a lot of different part of the social media that I know nothing about, the different avenues to get the word out. And this is great. I appreciate the opportunity to get on here. I mean, I think we've been on here a long time.
Yeah, the good thing about the podcast is you can take it in chunks. You can listen to it for 30 minutes while you're on the lawnmower, and then when you got to drive to that trial this weekend, you can listen to 45 minutes or an hour of it. You can pick and choose. But this is supposed to serve as a time capsule, and I'm just so thrilled to have all this documented and where people can go and listen to this and hear you and the stories and accounts. And just want to thank you again. Thank you, Randy, for joining the Breakaway Podcast.
You bet. I appreciate it. And I'll end with this. If anybody has a question about our sport or question about a dog or anything, feel free to contact me. And I'll try to lead you in the right direction.
You're a good man, Randy. You're good for the game. You're good for all of us. Thanks again.
Thank you.
That was the Breakaway Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on everything National Bird Hunters Association and all other field trial related content. But hopefully, we'll see you next time at the Breakaway.